Hello, and welcome once again to Lehto's Law. I'm Steve Lehto, attorney at law in the state of Michigan, where I'm practicing law now for 24 years in the fields of consumer protection and lemon law. I'm a frequent writer for places like Opposite Lock and Jalopnik. I've written a few books and magazine articles as well. Today we're going to talk about be careful about lending your car. Now this isn't about consumer protection so much, but people often call my office with questions involving cars and the law. So this is one I get asked about a lot, and I'll tell you, you do need to be careful about lending your car. A couple things you need to worry about, and I'm not even talking about the stuff that applies to most car lovers, and that is the fact that someone borrowing your car might not take as good care of it as you would. We've all heard stories or maybe had it happen to us where someone borrowed our car and brought it back and they'd done something to the car that we never would have done in a million years. Dumped something on the seat, burned something in the dashboard, scraped it, parked it too close to something, ran it over some parking blocks, whatever it might be. The damage someone can do to your car is very serious and you need to worry about it, but that's not even what I'm talking about. So number one, be careful lending your car to somebody because they might not take good care of it, okay? That's to me the first thing I think of, but as an attorney, I've got to tell you, the legal liability that you have when you lend someone else your car should give you pause. Now, I'm not saying don't ever lend your car to somebody, but just be aware of what can happen and what liability there might be, and then just at that point, make an educated decision. In Michigan and in many states, there's a thing called owner liability. That is that the owner of a vehicle is liable for the damage that vehicle does, regardless of who's behind the wheel for the most part. So I'm driving down the road in my car and I run you over. You can sue me, not because I was driving, but because I own the car. So my car's out in the driveway. You walk up to me and say, hey, Steve, can I borrow your car? And I say, sure, and I toss you the keys. And I start watching the football game. You get in my car, drive down the street, and run someone over. They will sue me because I own the car. Now, can they sue you as the driver? Sure, they could if they wanted to, but they'll get more money out of me because I've got insurance in the car. And that's how it works in Michigan. The insurance covers the owner for owner liability. So someone else in your car can create legal liability for you, okay? And that's something to think about. I've met many people, I'm surprised they have driver's licenses, who I would never lend my car to in a million years. I would say, I'm sorry, I can't lend you my car. I'd make something up. I might just say no. But if you asked to borrow my car, I'd probably say no unless I know you very, very well. I was actually thinking about this, and I've written several articles about my Ford Explorers and my love of those vehicles. And I had a Ford Explorer I recently got rid of at 247,000 miles. And I realized the entire time I owned it, I never let anyone else ever drive it. Now, it's largely because nobody ever asked to drive it that I can think of. But I put, of the 247,000 miles in that vehicle, I was in the vehicle for about 246,900 of them. I think there may have been an occasion where I took it to a dealership once to have a recall done on it, perhaps. And I think at that point in time, a mechanic may have driven it. But the only times other people drove the car that I'm aware of were brothers of mine who were driving it on trips with me when I was in the passenger seat. So I was in the vehicle while it was being driven. So that vehicle, as far as I know, was never driven outside of my presence the entire time I owned it, except for possibly, like I said, the one time a mechanic drove it. So I'm just one of these guys. I don't lend my car to lots of people. I guess people don't ask me, but I'm glad because I'd probably say no to most of them. But here's the thing. The vehicle being driven by somebody else that you own is creating liability for you. And this can even apply in other situations, such as the mechanic I mentioned earlier. The mechanic gets in your car, he takes it around the block to make sure that whatever you just fixed is working, and he runs somebody over with your car. You will get sued, okay? And that's because you own the vehicle and the mechanic was driving the vehicle with your consent. The only time you can escape liability on this, and it's a tough one, is if someone were to steal your car. And a thief who steals your car and then runs somebody over with it, you'll probably not be held liable for that, but you'll probably still get sued because your insurance is on the car and the car hits somebody, and they're going to try to make the argument that somehow it was your fault that you let the person steal your car. It doesn't happen that often, but owner liability is going to flow to you if you're driving the car or someone's driving the car with your consent. And you have to remember that consent in Michigan and many places is construed very broadly, meaning that they'll presume you gave somebody your consent, if it makes sense to do so. So I'm at a family reunion and I toss my keys on the counter and I go out back and I'm hanging out with, Uncle Buck, and I see my car go down the street. So one of my cousins said, hey, I need to take a car to go to the store. And they grabbed my keys because my car was at the end of the driveway and it was the easiest one to get out. And they jump in my car and they drive off with it. Now, they didn't ask me, and I didn't tell them they could drive my car. But if they run somebody over with my car, I'm going to get sued, and it's going to be presumed that I consented to it because they're a direct family relative of mine, okay? And there are going to be situations like that where the court's going to say, well, it's understood that relatives often borrow cars from each other without asking explicitly, may I borrow your car? And may I create some legal liability for you? Which, of course, nobody ever asks. So driven with consent can even extend to family members, and obviously it extends to people to whom you've given consent, such as a porter who's going to park your car, or a valet who's going to park your car, or a mechanic who's going to work on your car, and things of that nature. So you'll hear about that happening where somebody gets in someone else's car, they run somebody over, and all kinds of liability will pop up. Now, we've had cases before, and I've talked about this before. Search the phrase wrecked Corvette and Lehto, and you'll find the story I wrote. A client of mine brought her vehicle into a very, very reputable dealership in Oakland County, Michigan, and a porter hopped in her car and took it for a joyride right in the middle of the day. I think he was probably going to get lunch with it, but I'm not sure. And he took it out onto the road, he floored it, lost control of it, jumped it over a curb, flattened all four tires, ran it through a chain link fence, and basically did thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of damage to the car itself. And the dealership called up my client and said, well, minor incident on the dealership lot, but we'll take care of it. And then my client went and saw it and freaked out. But here's the thing. If the porter had run somebody over with her car, my client would have gotten sued. Now, she'd have to argue and say that the porter had no right to be taking the car and she had never consented to have the porter take the car for a joyride. But the dealership would have then rallied around the porter and said, oh, no. We told the porter to take the vehicle out for a test drive and check this or check that. And since he was doing it with our consent, which we got from her, he's therefore under the umbrella of her insurance policy. And trust me, the dealership would rather have her get sued than to have them get sued. Now, in that case, we sued them and we won, but it's another story altogether. Nobody was injured in that case. But if somebody had been physically injured by her car driven by the joyriding porter, I guarantee you my client would have gotten sued and very well might have had to pay out under her insurance policy. Now, a lot of people are listening to this going, Steve, who cares? That's what insurance is for. Well, you should be able to figure this out. If you get sued and you've got several $100,000 of insurance coverage and your insurance policy has to pay out several $100,000 because of something stupid someone did with your car, your rates will skyrocket if they don't cancel you, okay? They very well might just cancel you, or your rates will just, go through the roof. So you don't want to have these kinds of things happening to you if you can avoid it. One way to avoid it is, of course, don't lend your car to somebody who's going to do something like this. Now, don't get me wrong. You can't always predict it, and even good people, good drivers can get in accidents. Bad things can happen to good people. We all know that. But I'm just saying that we've all known the people that you don't lend your car to, and there's going to be that one person where it's like, oh, you should have seen that coming. Every family's got one or two people in it that are rough on vehicles, okay? And the same people who will burn cigarette holes in your seat, who will spill drinks in your car, who will run over parking blocks, who will bump into other cars in traffic or in parking lots. Those are the same kind of people who will accidentally run a red light and run over somebody, or who will, sideswipe a bicyclist, or who will do something like that, okay? We know these people, okay? So those people are the ones you want to be especially careful about lending your car to. You should probably think about this while we're talking about this. Company cars. You got a company car. Now, you don't own it. You don't insure it. Your company does. So when you hit somebody with your company car, guess who gets sued? Well, they do, which is good news, of course, but you might still get sued as the driver. The question is just simply, do you have any money or not? But if you own a company and you've got a fleet of company cars, I'm assuming that you are acutely aware of the fact that you as the company owner are on the hook as the owner of all those vehicles in the road. And when somebody does something stupid with one of your company cars, you're going to get sued. And in fact, I've known companies that as a policy would actually take away a company car from you if you got too many tickets, or if you ever got an alcohol-related driving offense. The thinking being that if you drink and drive, one of these days you might stupidly do that in our company car and kill somebody, and we're going to get sued for that. So if you are driving a company car right now, you need to think about how well you drive that car and whether or not your company should be looking at you saying, gee, maybe we shouldn't lend him or her a company car. Because that's one of the things, is the liability that flows back to the owner of that car, regardless of whether they're driving it or whether you're driving it. Now, I do have to tell you a story, and this, of course, is one of these horrible, crazy stories that happens 1 in a million years, but it's something that there is a lesson in for all of us. And that's the story of Ryan Hawley out of Florida. Ryan Hawley is a young man who was sleeping on a couch one day, and his friend said, hey, Ryan, can we borrow your car? And he said, sure, and he tossed him the keys, and he went back to sleep. Now, there's a little bit more to this story than this, but the important key facts, as my law professors would say, the key facts here are that Ryan Hawley was asleep on a couch while some other people in his car drove to a different location where they attempted to rob somebody. The robbery went awry, and during that botched robbery, they killed somebody, and then they fled in Ryan Hawley's car. And so somebody got a make on the car, and they ran it through the police. And next thing you know, Ryan Hawley is being dragged off his couch where he'd been sleeping and arrested for the fact that his car was used in a robbery where somebody had died. And of course, they prosecuted the people who did the killing, and they prosecuted Ryan Hawley. And they said, well, Ryan Hawley's part of the conspiracy because he provided his vehicle to these people who committed a crime. And at trial, the prosecutors argued and said, Ryan Hawley knew what these people were going to do with his car. Now, he claimed he didn't know, but a jury didn't believe him. And a jury said, no, we believe Ryan Hawley was part of the conspiracy. And under the felony murder concept, which still exists in a handful of states, if you are involved in a conspiracy to commit a crime, and during the commission of that crime, somebody dies, all of the members of the conspiracy can be held accountable and liable for what's called felony murder. And the thinking behind this is that you shouldn't go out and commit felonies, because if people die during a felony, it's a bad thing. And there's some really crazy examples over the years of people who've been rather distantly connected to a felony and have been found guilty of a murder as a result. And Ryan Hawley's one of them. So Ryan Hawley, no question, was asleep on his couch when somebody died. And the jury said, well, we don't care because we believe he knew that his car was going to be used as the getaway car in a robbery. And if he knew a robbery was going to take place, a robbery is a felony. Therefore, his knowledge of it and his aiding with it by giving them a vehicle to get away with and to get there with makes him a part of the conspiracy. Therefore, he's just as liable as the people who were there. Okay? Now, don't get me wrong. If Ryan Hawley knew those things, yeah, I agree he's guilty, and if you believe in the felony murder concept, then this is a righteous thing and he's in prison for the rest of his life. But number two, if he did not know, let's assume for a moment he's telling the truth, he did not know it was going to happen, some guys just said, hey, can we borrow your car? Then the fact that he's rotting in prison for the rest of his life might seem like a miscarriage of justice on some level to some of us, okay? Again, we don't know, we'll never know. He says he didn't know, the jury didn't believe him, okay? Now, the reason I'm telling you that horror story, okay, is that you, if you're an older person, I'd say above the age of, say, 25 or so, you need to sit down with the young folk in your family, the 16-year-olds, the 17-year-olds, the 18-year-olds, if they're your offspring or not, and have a talk with them. And I'm not talking about the talk that you have with them. I'm talking about the talk you have with them about the car. And you say, here's the deal with the car, okay? I want you to take good care of the car. You take good care of the car will take good care of you, okay? But number two, anytime someone's driving your car and you run somebody over with it, you're going to get sued. And you know how expensive your car was. You know how expensive your insurance is. Hopefully they're paying for it so they understand these things, okay? But then you have to say, but the third thing that Mr. Lehto told me, and you need to take this to heart, is if someone does something incredibly stupid with your car, like commits a crime with it, it might come back on you because you provided the car for the people who are doing this bad thing. And there are some states where, for instance, if you go to a bad part of town and you try to score some crack or you try to pick up a prostitute, they'll not only arrest you, but they'll impound your car. So next thing you know, you're sitting in jail and your car's in an impound lot, which is a jail for cars, I guess. Now, if it's your car, you're upset about that. But if it's not your car, you're not that upset about it, are you? So imagine this. Your young person, whether it's a child or a nephew, is at school one day and they're attending a party at some house outside of town with some of their friends, and there's some people there who are maybe not so closely acquainted with them. And somebody goes, hey, dude, can I borrow your car? We got to run out and get some stuff, okay? So your relative tosses them the keys, and then they drive to a bad part of town and try to score some crack. And an undercover cop arrests them and impounds the car. And now, of course, your nephew or your niece or your son or your daughter is at this party going, gee, I'd like to drive home, but my car's not here, and that guy never came back. And when you call that guy's cell phone, it just rings or it goes straight to voicemail because the police turned it off when they arrested him and booked him, okay? So you have to explain. You have to explain to your kid or your relative or whoever it is that you don't lend your car to strangers ever, and you're very careful about lending it to people that you think are your friends because bad things can happen to it. And if your child or your nephew or whoever it is has a hard time saying no to people who ask, tell them to revert to excuse number one. And that is, I take such good care of my car, no one else can drive it because no one else takes the same care of it as I do. I'm sorry, I don't lend my car to anybody. And I remember when I was in high school, I had a 1969 Dodge Charger. Look it up. I wrote an article about that too. Beautiful car. People would ask me if they could borrow it, and I would say no. They'd say, come on, man, I need to borrow a car. And go borrow someone else's. They say, come on, I need to borrow your car. And I said, no, I need my car. You don't need to borrow my car. I'm driving my car. And I would just steadfastly say no. And I can tell you right now that no one else in my entire life has ever gotten in one of my cars and done something stupid with it, largely because I don't lend my car to people. And that's why you need to be careful about lending your car to others, okay? They could do something bad to it and harm the car itself, but they can go out and run somebody over and harm you legally, and worse, they could go out and commit a crime with it, and committing a crime with it somehow might come back to haunt you as well. So be careful about lending your car. Questions or comments, always fire my way to my website, lehtoslaw.com, LEHTOSLAW.com. I'm on Twitter at Steve Lehto, at STEVELEHTO. And this show is now on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Podbean, Google Play, and YouTube. Thanks for watching, listening. Bye-bye.